I love Pokémon. It's given me so much happiness over the years, introduced me to some awesome people, and it's even been a crutch that's held me up through hard times. Sad boy moment. But did you know, my involvement with Pokémon actually has a huge black spot in it. An 18-year black spot between 2003 and 2021. During those years, I had literally nothing to do with Pokémon, apart from a short phase of playing Pokémon Go during that summer. Seriously, Pokémon Go's influence on society during the summer of 2016 needs to be studied way more. But apart from that, yeah, no involvement with Pokémon between 2003 and 2021. I didn't pay attention to any of the new games, new Pokémon, new anime. I was just completely clocked out of the franchise. And when I think about it, it feels pretty strange to me because 18 years is quite a long time. Whole adults have spawned into existence in that time frame. Why did I say that? Now I'm sad and old. So during the whole situation we had a few years back, you know, where we all had to stay inside for months and toilet paper was worth more than gold. Yeah, that situation. I started becoming curious about Pokémon again, and I wanted to see what the mainline games were like nowadays. The latest releases at the time were Pokémon Sword and Shield. So naturally, as one does in the modern age, I started by looking around for reviews on YouTube. And after watching about a dozen 2-hour-long video essays absolutely ripping these games to pieces for being buggy, rushed, national dexless pieces of garbage that only sold because of the brand power the Pokémon name holds, I decided to become part of the problem and buy Pokémon Sword and Shield anyway. But you know what? I love these games. I've developed a hell of a bias towards them because they are the games that officially pulled me back into the Pokémon franchise. Everything Pokémon related that I'm doing right now, making these videos, streaming, connecting with really cool people, I owe directly to Pokémon Sword and Shield. But to stay on track here, coming back to the franchise got me thinking about exactly why I put it to one side for so many years in the first place. I wanted to share a couple of the really silly reasons why I stopped playing Pokémon games. So like I said, it was 2003. It was the summer of 2003. And Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire had just been released here in the UK. Now, I loved Gen 1. I absolutely adored Gen 2. So little Craig was really excited to see what the next games would bring. And this is going to upset all you home fans out there, because I really did not like these games. And I give you full permission to laugh at me for the following ludicrous reasons why. Okay, buckle up. So firstly, there was no day-night cycle. I know it technically existed for growing berries and stuff, but it didn't visibly become nighttime in the game, and that annoyed me. We just introduced that in the last games. Why are you taking it away from me? One thing that really pulled me into Pokemon Silver, Gold and Crystal was the fact that the in-game world mirrored the time of the real world, and I loved playing at night. As a kid, you weren't allowed out at night, but in this game you were, and that was exciting to me. I feel like that one was actually my more reasonable excuse for not being a fan of these games. So now I've got you back on side a little bit, let me say something that will burn all of that to the ground again. I also dislike these games because you couldn't go back to past regions. Okay, hear me out here, because you were able to go back to Kanto in the Gen 2 games. For whatever reason, that set a precedent in my head that every Pokemon game going forward was going to feature a new region, but with all the past regions still in there too. I honestly thought that the world was building upon itself with each game, and that every game was going to feature every region up until that point. Obviously I was a very dumb kid, and I was very wrong. But I was genuinely furious when I found out that I wouldn't be going back to Johto or Kanto after beating the Pokemon League. I specifically remember I didn't even battle the Elite Four in Ruby and Sapphire. Didn't see the point. In fact, here's something crazy. I found my Game Boy Advance SP along with all my old Pokemon games a while back, and somehow my Pokemon Ruby save is still there. You are looking at a party of Pokemon that is over 20 years old at this point. That is just mental to me. Sometimes I think I should defeat the Pokemon League on here just so I can say that it took me 20 years to beat Pokemon Ruby. There are also a few smaller things that didn't matter too much but that I wasn't a huge fan of. The 2 different bikes that you needed to keep switching between were a tad annoying to me. I remember not being a fan of the diving mechanic. No specific reason for that, just didn't take to it. None of the starter Pokemon particularly stood out to me. I love them nowadays. In fact, I Masuda hunted all 3 of them in Pokemon Shield. But at the time, they felt like a step down from the previous starters. To get serious for a second, I suppose the unifying point overarching all of these reasons was that these games felt like such a departure from the Pokemon games I knew. It was a completely new world, entirely separated from everything that came before it. There was no Professor Oak here, no Team Rocket, no trading with earlier games, no set rival. Your rival was just the opposite gender trainer to the one that you chose. It was a game created to exist solely within its own bubble, created at a time when a lot of people were losing interest in Pokemon. That initial wave of Pokemania had simmered down, and the franchise had to look forward and try and reinvent itself to pull in new audiences. You know, when I came back to the Pokemon games, as I mentioned, Pokemon Shield was the game I came back to. But something I rarely tell people is that I also bought and played Pokemon Omega Ruby at the same time, because I felt like there was a debt that I owed to the Hoenn region. Younger me didn't give this region a fair shake because he was comparing it too closely to what came before it. And everything that came before Hoenn was very closely connected. It all tied back into the original Pokemon narrative. These games were a push in a different direction, and I didn't fully appreciate that as a kid. But that's sort of the story anyway. That's the reason why I left Pokemon for 18 years. It sounds extreme that one dissatisfied experience would push me away from an entire franchise for so long, but there were other factors too. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was blowing up massively around that time, and I sort of moved across and put all my eggs in that basket for a good few years. I'd also really started to get into sports for the first time around that point too, so I had other things to occupy myself with to not feel the need to come back to Pokemon. It literally took a world-stopping event to bring Pokemon back into my peripheral. To make it clear, I never stopped loving Pokemon. I just held it as an object of nostalgia for a long time because I thought my time with it had come to an end. And that does make me a little sad. I do wish I'd persevered and at least given the next games a shot. I have gone back and played the majority of the older games now, with the exception of Black and White 2. I'll get to that at some point. But I do feel like I missed out on the truly authentic experience of playing these games during their time in the spotlight. But above all else, I'm just grateful to be where I am now, enjoying the franchise again, and interacting with other people that do too. Anyway, thanks for listening to my little story, and I'd love to hear from anyone else that left the Pokemon franchise for any amount of time, and what the reasons were for that, what brought you back. If this applies to you, please do drop a comment down below. I'd love to hear about your experience. If you like this video, feel free to drop a like down below, subscribe for more Pokemon videos, and follow me on Twitch if you'd like to hang out when I go live. That's all from me, and I'll catch you all in the next one.